What's up, everybody? Welcome to Black and White TV. Jay is
I'm in the city.
at the top of a skyscraper right
I'm
now.
at the top of the city.
Welcome to Black and White TV. It's so good to see you. And maybe if we can't see you, you can hear us. And we're so grateful that you would join us this week on this podcast that we call Black and White TV. Jay, why do we call this Black and White TV?
Because you're white.
Oh, really?
And I'm not.
I'm very white and freckled. Yeah.
You're very white, yes. And I am black. No, but it's also because we talk about black and white issues that tend to divide us, divide our relationships, our country, our communities. And we talk about what is there in between, maybe some gray, maybe some color.
Yeah.
Something
Exactly.
like that.
So thank you so much for joining us. And we're excited to talk about a little bit of a hot topic. We're in a series right now, Jay. I don't know if you knew this. We're in a series right now titled, So I Heard Someone Say.
I think you're adding.
Jay, did you happen to hear someone say anything last night during the Oscars?
I didn't hear it last night. So no.
No, I didn't either.
Not at all.
What was the meme you were just telling me about? Like somebody was like, I didn't even know there was Oscars until I found out this morning.
Will slapped Chris Rock.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we're going to get to that in just a second. But basically what we're covering in this month, I don't know, we'll see how long we go with this series. So I heard someone say, it's basically we're tackling topics that you might hear someone say, you might read in a meme, or maybe you've even thought or wondered about out loud. And sometimes those are the topics that need to be talked about, right? It's the stuff that kind of people are kicking up the dust and talking about. By the way, my son said that I have to get off soon because he wants to play War. Have you ever played War?
Like I Declare War, the card game?
The card game, yeah.
I called it I Declare War. I did not call it war.
You never shorten it to just war?
No, it's very millennial of you.
I declare
Gen Z of you.
So, have you ever been punched in the face?
Absolutely not.
Have you ever punched somebody in the face?
Maybe by mistake. Maybe not.
How does that happen by mistake?
Someone walked to my fist.
Oh, interesting. So you've been the giver, not the receiver.
Yeah, I don't.
It's better to give.
Punch. I've been hit though, but not punch. Like I don't think anyone deliberately just in the face. No, I used to fight a lot with like my brother and my cousins and my brother's friends. Fighting with quite the tomboy. So yes, lots of fighting there. There was slapping. I've been slapped in the face. I'm pretty sure. Okay. But not a fan of anyone touching the face. That's when I turn into She-Hulk, maybe.
You've never been knuckle punched.
I have not been knuckle punched in the face on purpose. Sean, have you?
No, I've been swung at a few times.
They missed. Sean is
when you're as fast as I am, yeah, like
Have you been slapped in the face, Sean?
I've not been slapped or punched in the face. I've been slapped and punched in other parts.
Yeah,
but not the face. Yeah.
This sounds a little crazy.
Face is next level, right?
Yeah,
face is next level.
Honestly, okay, so let me tell you my truth as a young person, okay? At some point, I wanted to be a boxer, okay? Because people were like, Jay, you have big hands. You should be a boxer. And I liked fighting. So I was like, yes, I think this is a good idea for me. Started to train towards being a boxer. And I was like, wait a minute. Somebody is going to want and deliberately try to punch me in my face. And if they succeed, will the boxing training still be there for them? I don't think so. So I was like, this is a bad idea. So then I switched to martial arts. Don't judge me.
And the logic there, they don't.
Well, I was like,
I
don't want to do offense. I want to do defense.
Okay, I see.
I don't want to attack someone.
Yeah,
I want to be able to defend. So,
if we were the type of podcast where we did like live polls, I bet if we did a poll on who would win a boxing match, you or me, I bet you would get all the votes. I bet they'd be like, oh, heck yeah, Jay would take Sean.
Jay from Jersey.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But I only got into one real fight in my whole life.
Okay.
And I was 10 with a boy because he told me to shut up.
How did that work out for the boy?
He was fine.
Okay.
He was more aggressive than I had anticipated. And he was much bigger than me.
It seems like you don't think these things through to the end very well.
That's not what happened for Jamila. I was offended that he told me to shut up. And I was like, who does he think he is? Does he know who he's talking to? And so I attacked. Yeah. It didn't go well for me. Yeah.
Well, so here's the thing. Jay and I were talking earlier today about, there's a double-edged sword to talking about hot topics, right? Like, one, when they are hot off the press, like what happened last night with Will Smith and Chris Rock, it can seem opportunistic. It can seem like we're just kind of jumping on the bandwagon. And that is not at all what we want to do. In fact, we actually don't want to go into a lot of detail on the particulars of it because we don't know yet, right? It's so hot off the press that there's going to be more detail that comes out in a few days. And in all likelihood, we could end up saying something now that we wish we hadn't said later because we're like, oh my gosh, we didn't even know all that. But what we do feel is important is to take something that obviously a lot of people either watched live or found out about the next day. And especially with somebody like Will Smith's stature, it becomes a pretty big deal because of his level of influence. So maybe Jay, for the handful of people that totally missed what happened, just give a quick recap of the incident. Not necessarily like we don't have to know all the details. Like we said, we don't maybe know all the details, but what happened?
Yeah, so Chris Rock made a joke about Jada Pinkett Smith. And initially what it looked like was, Will laughed, Jada didn't. And then Will then approached Chris and slapped him in the face, walked away, and then continued to tell him, like, do not talk about my wife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty intense.
It was intense.
Yeah. I mean, for those that want to Google it and watch it later, there's language, you might not want to watch it with little kids if you're kind of, because, Will was very emotionally upset by the joke that Chris chose to use. Felt like he had crossed a line. And again, you and I, like maybe this is even helpful. We don't really know all the facts. Like we weren't even sure, was Chris presenting something? Like was he the host?
We didn't watch the Oscars. We are non-Oscar watching people who saw clips of things and have read different things and are piecing together pieces of a story. Also, we're using our own filters, which is how this is how we do things, right? So we're not saying like we were there or we watched the whole thing and this is, before, during, and after. Now, there were some things that happened after that I thought was kind, which was Denzel Washington and Tyler Perry and Bradley Cooper speaking to Will, like calming him down and sharing some truth with him in that moment. And then, then Will was he then won the Best Male Actor award for the first time. And so, and then he shared his apology in the moment. So there's that. So you can watch all that stuff.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think as you and I were talking about this earlier today, neither one of us are going to cancel Will Smith or Chris Rock, right? I mean, we don't know all the details again, so more could come out and that might be something that we could reevaluate later. But my initial reaction wasn't, okay, I think he was right, he was wrong, or vice versa. And now I'm going to pour on some hate or some like attacking of this person or that person, because both were wrong. I mean, one was wrong for telling joke in poor taste based on Jada Pinkett, Will Smith's wife, having gone through some health issues related to the joke that Chris Rock was telling. So bad joke, bad timing, all of that. Just can't do that. And then Will Smith, like we were talking about how Will Smith wasn't like standing next to him and just reacted in the moment and hit him. He literally like got up out of his seat from the theater, walked all the way up the steps to where Chris Rock was, slapped him, said something to him, and then walked all the way back down. And the one article I read was basically by then, you know, whoever was broadcasting it is trying to like edit and bleep and go to commercials or whatever they did. But both were in the wrong. And I think for me, what it really showed was just, it's the humanity of how we all make mistakes. We all make mistakes. Theirs happened to be in a very extremely public situation that's been recorded and will be shown over and over and over again. And I'm guessing
some would say they did not both make a mistake. One of them, his job is to comede, right? And people and people have their varying degrees of what's acceptable comeding, if you will, but they tend to push, right?
Right.
And so and that's like a normalcy of our culture. And so they would not say that Chris was wrong at all, because he didn't react, right? He could have then been like, oh, we're fighting, right? Like, he would not have been the best choice, but he could have, you know, but instead chose to like make a joke and try to wheel it back in, kind of a thing. So yeah, I understand what you're saying too.
Yeah, I mean, so that's a good point. You know, even humor, there's always going to be those that think some things are in poor taste, others who think everything is fair game in comedy.
I saw a lot of comments that people were saying, you know, people are too sensitive now, people are overly sensitive and all those kind of things. And it's just like, you just never know people's story. You don't know what you don't know. And especially if someone's behaving out of their normal character, then it's something to, again, just like potentially lean into, right?
Right.
Just being like, you're done.
Yeah. So I think one thing that I would be great for another episode, we won't do it today, is that whole topic of how do you know, when you start dehumanizing somebody, is it okay? Is it fair game in comedy to dehumanize people?
Or is that dehumanizing? Because someone might say that's humanizing.
Maybe.
You know what I mean? Like, there's a couple of different ways to look at it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so we can talk about it another time.
But I think what we did agree on was both lost. There was no win in this situation. And there, you know, whether or wherever you stand on the issue or the whole subject of dehumanizing in comedy, Will Smith felt like his wife was I don't know, what would you say? How would you describe that?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say what he exactly what he felt, right? But it was at this point where you're looking at him, looking at her, right? He laughed, she didn't, you know, and my presumption is that, you know, he knows her hurt, right? And there's listen, hair in general, Black women hair, that's a big deal, right? And so, and then you're a public figure, and her hair used to be a part of something that was like in advertisements and like all this kind of stuff. So there's just a lot of stuff in there related to that. And so we don't know what her stuff is, but if he took her hurt as his hurt and his hurt turned to anger, I imagine that's somewhat in that space. But obviously, again, I think there's way more to that.
Yeah, that's a good summary. And Jay, you may not know this, so correct me if I'm wrong, or you can just say you're not sure. But was there also something related to her hair loss due to a health medical type issue?
It's called alopecia, where there's different types of alopecia, and so I'm not sure which type of alopecia she has, but alopecia is essentially like your body is like, it starts to, you can lose hair. So like there's people who have no hair all over their body. Some people lose hair just in just their hair up here, kind of a thing. And so yeah, there's different forms of it. So that's the one where she was losing hair on her scalp.
Yeah. Okay, so Jay, we've already agreed we may not even like air this, because we also are treading on some thin ice, even talking about a subject matter like this that's very sensitive. But what struck me very quickly, no pun intended, was that basically we are on campuses every week. Violence is a big premier conflict on these school campuses. Really you do a lot. I mean, we do it together, but there's parts of our workshops where you do a lot of emphasis on overreacting and the danger and the risk, and potentially, what happens when we sort of black out for a moment and put aside principles or skills or ways to cope with a tense situation versus to react. And that really struck me in watching it yesterday or this morning was, it just makes it that's the real world, isn't it? Like we're all human. We're all prone to make mistakes. In this situation, it's challenging too, because we're like, man, we're trying to advocate for nonviolence. And I'm sure Will Smith is like, he probably felt like he had to stand up, man up, and defend the honor of his wife or his family. It makes for some really tough conversations, doesn't it?
And we've had some really good dialogue about, like we had kids even debate literally about school violence and when is it okay and when is it not. And they had some really good points, because I'm like, always no. And then it was like, but wait a minute, if somebody's like beating you down and you've tried the other methods that we've talked about, right? Like you told the teacher, you told your parent. Sometimes parents will tell you like, defend yourself, right? If you feel like you're being attacked. I would say that the majority of the kids would say, if someone hits me, then I'm gonna hit them back, kind of a thing.
Right.
Rather than I'm going to be right. So I think it's important to think about like the fullness of what could happen after this moment. But again, if your thinking brain goes offline because you're in fight, flight, or freeze, that is bound to happen, right? So yeah, it's unfortunate.
Yeah. So Jay, one of the things that we do with students, it might be in workshop too. It could, I think it actually might be towards the end after we've gone through enough of the principles with them, is we'll ask students to volunteer to come up voluntarily in front of the class and describe a situation, not mention any names, but describe a situation in which they were having a difficulty with somebody else.
Right.
And then we have the principles on the board, and we ask them, would any of these principles have helped in that situation? Which of our principles would have helped Will Smith or Chris Rock? Either way, one or both. Last night.
I wanted to ask you that.
Oh, really?
What do you think? Yeah, I wonder what you think. What do you think of the principles, our 6 principles, like would have been a filter for Will in last night, you think?
Yeah. I've thought about it, not enough yet, because there's just been such little time. But one, he made a very bold decision to take this live, right? Like other options could have been, I'll find him afterwards. We'll have a discussion privately. There's other options. But the option he chose was a very public display of expressing how he felt. The physical part is the hardest piece because, you know, Chris might have Will Smith felt like his wife was being verbally attacked. Chris did not physically attack, and Will chose to physically attack back. And so I think in my mind, one of the things that came to my mind is obviously like exercise, slowing down, like, okay, take a few deep breaths right here because my blood's boiling. I can tell my wife is about to come undone. We could exit. We could take a few breaths. We could find other alternatives to address this afterwards. Or if Will did feel like because Chris is saying this, like broadcasting it, and he feels like now I need to not deal with this privately. I need to broadcast back how I disagree with this type of comedy or whatever he's saying to his wife. I did wonder, like, he could have literally just stood up and said something like, I apologize to what do they call it? The Oscar committee or whatever. But and I apologize to whoever's broadcasting this. You're going to need to pause this and go to commercial because I'm going to have to address something that he just said, and we're going to talk this out right now. And then, like, at least let broadcasters like figure out what they're going to do, and then have a verbal dialogue as opposed to walk up and slap him. So I don't know. I mean, those are just some of the things that came off the top of my head. There's obviously other alternatives.
Yeah, I think there are several different ways. But again, when you're in the moment, you're in the moment. And like I said, if your thinking brain goes offline and you're just like, I'm in react mode, seeing red, any of those kind of things where it just like took a turn real fast. Or again, if it's a buildup of things where you're like, I always pretend to be okay, but I'm not going to pretend today. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like there was some of that in there. I will say, I think some uniter moments that happened was after, right? Like, again, like Denzel, Tyler Perry, Bradley Cooper, like, because they could have just been like, you're messed up and you shouldn't have done that. And we're not talking to you. You know what I mean? Like, they could have done that, which is how our culture can be sometimes. I think we've talked about this before. There's a difference between canceling and holding someone responsible. And I think that there absolutely needs to be responsibility held here of, you did do something that's not okay. And I don't want it to be okayed, right? And like, what's the learning? What do we take away from this? And like, what can he take away from this? Like, how do you we just need to help each other, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
So, yeah.
No, I think you're right. And I think I hope there's a lot of potential for good still to come out of this, because the reality is, as much as any of us want to judge and sort of point fingers and we know that this is how the world works, right? Like, we build people up until they make a mistake, and then we just rip them to shreds.
Right.
So here's an opportunity to watch, and allow for space. You and I talked about earlier, like, people are going to argue about like one or both, one or the other, it doesn't matter, however way you view it, should have apologized immediately. Well, had that happened, which I'm not saying it should or shouldn't have happened, but had that have happened, then everybody would have like piled on and like, it was disingenuous. It was, they didn't mean it, or they should have said this word, or they should have said this phrase.
Right.
And so like, we're taking a very raw situation, trying to dissect it, when really life just needs some space to breathe. You need to give some people who are in the close proximity of that conflict space to breathe, and give them a chance to work it out. And while they're working it out, don't be like over there in the sidelines, taking them out at their knees and gossiping and like pulling them down, like root for them to figure it out.
Right. Yeah. Like what is the authentic response on any side, right? Like the person who got hit, the person who hit, the person who said words that could be really hurtful to someone and you don't know what their story or their struggle is, like those kind of things. All those things can be considered in just how we process different things, and stop placing people on these like unrealistic pedestals, right? Like I love me some Will, okay? And I'm like, and I think that was a pedestal moment for me because it hurt me to watch that moment. Like I felt like, oof, like a family member just did something real messed up, and I was like, dang, like I was like, oh man, like, and it just, oof, like it felt, I felt it. So yeah, so I'm processing too, like, okay, I'm giving a lot of weight and energy to this person as well, and it's like, is that theirs to carry? Like, stuff that I can check myself on too. So yeah.
Well, I know we probably need to wrap up, but I mean, a couple closing thoughts for me. One, with what you just said, is when we talk to students, when we do these workshops about humanizing or dehumanizing, one of the things that we often do talk about is a way to dehumanize somebody in a passive way is to lift them, raise them up, worship them on a pedestal, and they become an object, and again, we all do it, especially with celebrities, because they're just so iconic and so like beyond human. Sometimes we literally have dehumanized them, and we've not given the opportunity then when they are human to, and not acting, but actually being a real human, to make mistakes and walk that through with them. And obviously there's accountability, like you said that word earlier. I mean, it's not like it's a blank check, there is accountability. The other thing that came to mind too was like when you said earlier, part of humanizing other people is to give space before you say something or ask something, and pause to consider if there could be backstory that I could be overstepping here. And I shared the example this past week when we were at the ninth grade center at Seminole High School, that there was it was a few years ago, I came into a classroom and there was a high school girl that walked in and was about to sit down, and she was really tall. And I thought it was like, I was just going to make conversation. I'm like trying to find just something light to talk about. And because she was really tall, I'm like, do you play basketball? And she got so mad at me. Like I literally was like taken aback. And at first I was like, why is she being so sensitive? Like, this is so ridiculous. I only asked if you play basketball because you're tall. And she said, yeah, the problem is I've been tall all my life. And when I was little, I tried to play basketball because everybody said I should, and I couldn't. I wasn't very good at it. So I got made fun of for not being able to play basketball. And so every time somebody asks me, do you play basketball just because you're tall? It reminds me of how terrible I am, at something like that, and how much everybody expects that I should be really good at that. So, I mean, there's lots of ways that we sometimes just, it can be accidental, it can be inadvertent, but to get to know people for who they are and where they are, it's important.
And I think just to be mindful too, just as much as like sometimes we want to make sure that people feel the sting of what they did and make sure they feel like all those kind of things. Sometimes we'll get to a place where we are dehumanizing that person, which is dehumanizing us, and that's the whole thing, right? You're like, I want to hold this person accountable. How do you hold this person accountable in a way that's non-divisive? Because there's a way to do that. So just check yourself. That's all. We all have our stuff. Check yourself.
Absolutely. That's good.
There's opportunity.
Many opportunities. Well, thanks everybody for joining us on this week's Black and White TV. We hope something was helpful to you. If not, don't blame me, blame Jay. That's what we do. That's just a way to pass the buck and just blame somebody else. But it's been good to see you, Jay. It's been fun to hang out, and we hope that you can take some of these principles, those that are listening. If you're listening or watching in a platform where you can make comments, we love to read those. If you think of something, like right now, one of those I heard someone say kind of moments, put that in the comments section. We read those, and we might even follow up with a future episode and talk about that. We might.
Yeah.
Until next time.
Listen, learn, lean in.
Bye.
Bye.